Thank you for everyone for joining. We're really excited to have you here, especially discussing around the future of wearable design, including VR, AR, and augmented reality. So a little background about myself. I lead UX design at Google in terms of focusing around different initiatives around different spaces around UX. I really love designing really cool stuff. I'm always about thinking kind of the next big thing of user experiences. My background is I have a design strategy MBA. So when I design products, I really think about the intersection between business, UX, and design thinking. This is something that I really take pride in my courses, is that this isn't just your regular design class, but this cumulation of a lot of different practices embedded in one. And I'm a big thing. I love making and building things, being really crafty and really liking to do the whole product design development. So I love this quote. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? This is really inspiring because what Apple does is something really creative, right? They really are thinking around disruption. And what my focus is around offering a course which we can design disruptive products, one which can be novel, one which can be different. And in doing so, learning around the tools and practices on how to get there. So what makes this course really unique is that it covers a lot of interesting topics. It's a breadth of different experiences. One of the things you're going to learn is a potpourri of different types of practices, from learning how to design for Apple Watch, learning how to design for Android Wear, learning how to design for AR, VR. We also cover designing for autonomous car like Tesla dashboard, Apple dashboard display. We cover designing for drone mobile UX, connected IoT home experiences, chatbots, which include things that you see on Facebook and Slack, voice interaction that you see today, we call VUI with Amazon Echo and Google Home, healthcare, which is a big space right now, specifically learning around new prototyping tools, and how to really create emotional design, which is something that users really want to see, specifically in the day and age that we live in, designing for wearable glasses, and then how to create multi-device experiences. So this is a 5-week course. But what's nice about this is that it's actually compartmentalized into these week sections, where each section you learn a little bit of these different topics, right? So at the end, you actually will get a breadth of knowledge around how to design for these specific things. And what this course does is, as I start teaching this material, you actually decide what area do you want to focus on. Do you want to design a portfolio around AR, VR, wearable, or smartwatches? It's really up to you. What my goal is to provide the tools and resources to help you get there. So design thinking strategy. One of the things that I really enjoy doing is teaching the design thinking process, which is really hands-on, which involves a lot of this exploration and design process, from the exploration of really uncovering your idea to defining your user and your user stories, to going to the iteration cycle of design, prototyping, testing, all the way from developing and shipping and then measuring. These things are all part of the funnel of designing products, which happen to work well with AR, VR, and wearables, and it can be applied to many other things. So what my goal is to really teach you this foundation so that you can apply this process to any products you build from the ground up. So let's talk about the history, right? The history of UX. The history of UX is pretty broad, right? In the last 10, 20 years, you see this uplift of things that have to do with Fitbit tracking, smartwatches, Android Wear, Pebble, like there's all these wearables, right? So as UX designers, we actually have the opportunity to really think around how do we design for these specific form factors? And one of which is Android Wear, right? In this slide here, you can see that Android Wear is a product from Google, allowing you to be able to interact on a small display. But in order to do so, you really need to think about how do you design for these experiences, right? What are those mental models? What are those frameworks? And what are those patterns that you need to do as designers? And so what this class really walks through is like really honing in on that craft, right? Really think around those frameworks, like the patterns. These are just early days of Android. Like we really do a lot of experimental work, like really uncovering what worked and what didn't, early ages. So these are just some examples of how Android and Google really explore different things of like a compass UI, a list view UI, right? Different types of paradigm, all the way to early mock-ups of different visual grid systems, right? And so as you see this list goes on and on, you really start to get a feel of the taxonomy and just the breadth of these different visualizations. And this is really important that you guys know this stuff because it really gives you a sense of acknowledging what has worked in the past. And as you start to design your own Android Wear experiences, you see, okay, these are the patterns that you do for Match.com, right? This is how it looks for Tinder. It gives you a breadth of different knowledge. And so at the end of this course, you actually will have the skill set to design these specific interfaces, right? Either you want to design for Android Wear, Apple Watch, it's up to you. But these are just really some high level examples of things that you would be able to learn. So now let's pivot to smart things. So smart things now is a really interesting space, right? At Google, we have the Nest thermostat. This gives you a chance to be able to connect and with your phone and be able to manage the temperature in your room. But all this is connected to a mobile app, right? And so when you think about smart devices, you think about your mobile app as well as the hardware devices. So when we think about designing these experiences, you can't just think about the hardware, but you need to think about the whole system, right? How do these things really play hand in hand? How do these things fit with the model of like your hardware device connected to your car, connected to your Whirlpool, connected to your dryer, right? These things give you the sense of proximity and like this sense of your smart home. And so we really learn around these specific things of like how you design for these experiences and what these things look like. Specifically, like how would you design this experience on a phone, right? How do you design an experience that connects it to a hardware device? These are frameworks and patterns that you're going to learn as we start going through the nitty gritty of this class. Wearables is becoming pretty big, as you know, right? There's a lot of different types of wearables, from wrist wearables to glasses to watches to headbands. And what's interesting is you see this evolution, right? Wearables are becoming a lot more fundamentally a lot more attractive, right? They're becoming form factors of jewelry. Fitbit now had partnered with Tory Burch to offer a specific product line of jewelry. And so when in doing so, you really need to think about, okay, with these devices, which are trackers, tracking your heart rate, tracking your weight, how do you design these experience on a mobile phone? This is what you learn in this class. You will actually be able to design things like these. Even though these are examples of what's in the wild, what this class teaches you are the patterns, right? Another product is Wally, which tracks your water leaks, your humidity and temperature. These are just some UI elements that you learn around how do you really resonate some of these attributes on a specific phone. Then you have a smart device like Automatic, right, which you put in your car. This is another way of instance of really acknowledging connectivity between a car and your phone. So you can see here how, like, even though these are smart devices, the UI and the experience really evolves, right? It really kind of showcases differentiator in terms of what are those user stories, who are your users, what's your audience you're trying to reach, and how do you convey something that's appealing so that users understand exactly what they need to get away from the specific product. So these are just some highlighted screens that really walk through like the UI elements, the interaction patterns. These are all things that we're going to learn as we start getting more in the weeds in terms of these product experiences. So then we think around air conditioning, right? This is a very different model, but in the same space, it's connected to your phone. So as you can see here, it's not just you're designing a social media app, right? Or you're not designing a data app. You really need to think around how do you design a mobile app connected to hardware, right? It's this instance of these terminologies, these mental models, these frameworks that need to follow, because these are new patterns which users are engaged with. And as UX designers or a product manager or marketing manager, developer who's taking this course, you're going to learn these specific things, which then in doing so, you could build these things yourself in terms of the mobile experience. This is another one. It's a lock app which engages with your phone. So you can see here this paradigm of different mental models and different ways you can really design these experiences. So let's now kind of shift gears and talk about smart glasses. So this was actually picked up years ago. I'm not sure how this was discovered, but there was actually Google Glasses in around 1800s. I'm not sure if you guys figured this, but I was like mind-boggled by this. I thought this picture was really funny because it really signifies where we've gotten in terms of glasses, right? And where we're gonna be. Glasses are the future in some respect, right? Facebook is connecting with branded glasses like Ray-Bans, where they're offering cameras and be able to connect with your Facebook. And so it's kind of our duty to be able to understand how these things work as UX designers, because as you design products experiences, you can't just rely on designing a website, right? As to be a really successful UX designer, you have to be broad. You really have to understand kind of the scope of your landscape. Like, what are those trends? What do I need to get there? What are those technologies? What are those UX principles that I need to know for me to be successful, so that when my name is called or when my UX manager is like, hey, I need you to design something like this, you'll be well aware of what you need to do. And so that's why we're covering these type of things, is it gives us more of a broad stroke of understanding what the space looks like. And so that's why one of the things that I think is interesting is the early days of Glass, because they were really experimental, right? They were really trying to change the norm of how do we interact wearing glasses. And so a lot of these paradigms that you saw from Glass is actually coming for fruition for a lot of smart glasses today. But what's interesting is you actually have Google Glasses that are predominantly still in hardware when you're dealing with manufacturing, right? When you're dealing with medical, like surgeons are using it in kind of surgery. So there's still a prominent space where these things can do, but it's up to us to really think about these things. And so this just covers different instances of how glass is being built. We actually prototype in terms of designing for smart glasses. These are just some screenshots, which some students have done in the past. And really thinking around how do you design for branded experiences from like Twitter to Evernote to Facebook, really having that product stewardship when you're designing specific things. And you can see here is like, when you're thinking about this evolution, is like you have the cloud, which is forever. You have last year was your laptop, and then you have last month is your phone, but then you have this spatial experience right here, right? This is where I think the opportunity lies with a lot of users. And so these are just some examples of what Nike has done when they've experienced some smart glass. So, you know, a little bit of eye candy, but these are things which you learn in this class. So eventually you can kind of understand how these things look and build your own experience and be able to have a beautiful portfolio for it to shine. So let's switch gears to AR and VR. So AR and VR is really interesting because we really expect this industry in 2025 to be an $80 billion market, right? It's a huge market. And so it's up to us as product designers, as UXers, engineers, to be able to really understand how these things look and feel, right? Because the opportunity is really fresh. People aren't just now sitting and on their phone, like they want some different ways to engage, right? AR is a lot feasible. You have the AR kit from Apple. You have what's offered in Facebook, right? There's potential. But in order to actually design for these products, you actually have to know what that process is and what are those frameworks look like. And so what we do in this class is we cover a lot of these different trends from what we've seen in the past to what's in the future, right? And so these are just some sketches of a student that did an augmented reality app for Mario Kart, where, you know, imagine you have your phone and you're using augmented reality and you're playing Mario Kart with your friends, right? This is a really interesting way of just showcasing innovation of like things that we do in this class. We're very hands-on. We're using a lot of tools like sketching, sticky notes, Figma, a lot of prototyping tools. So you're going to learn a range of different tools for your toolbox. And then it's up to you to really decide where do you want to apply these tools depending on what kind of design challenge you're facing. So you can see here how we've really started with the 2D evolution, right? From like GUI to like touch phone to like CAD. And now we're kind of looking into this immersive 3D and 2D experience, which we call a spatial model. And it's just like Iron Man, but it's a little different because these are very virtual. These are futuristic. But what's interesting is a lot of things that come in today's time actually are inspired by technology from the past, right? Like Iron Man, Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is like moving things around on the screen and he's trying to engage, right? This is really important because we can get inspired by these specific instances as we design these specific products, right? But you know, having an augmented reality vision where you're using your eye to track things, that could be kind of annoying, right? My arms get tired when I start moving around the things. That can be tiring. The menu is actually behind me. Like that's another instances of augmented reality which can be a little bit burdensome. So it's really up to us to really think around those use cases and how do we design products to fulfill those needs so it doesn't become tiresome. so it doesn't become a bad experience. So for folks who are wondering like, hey, like what is the difference between VR and AR? It's pretty concrete, right? Virtual reality means things that are in a virtual world where you put on a mask and you're able to be in a place which doesn't feel like a real life. You're not using your camera like you would use in augmented reality. Some good examples is what you see in Matrix. Kind of excited, not gonna lie, they're coming up with a Matrix sequel. So for those folks who like Matrix, stand on the lookout. Uh, but then we also have an evolution of augmented reality, right? What we see in Iron Man, things that are suited for wearable technology and devices. So when we think around virtual reality, we're really thinking around like, how do we use VR, right? Like, how do you design for these things? Like when I first started in this space 6 years ago, I was fairly new, but like I did my homework in terms of like looking at resources, looking at guidelines, gather things together so that I can provide and teach these things to my students, right? And so these are just some snapshots of like looking at kind of case studies of like VR, AR, where you know what's cool about Yelp app, you have the monocle view, right, where you can like take out your phone and it kind of uses augmented reality to let you know like what restaurants are nearby, or your GPS, right? Today, these are all instances of augmented reality when you're using your phone to kind of create this virtual sense. Or folks who are really big in Pokemon, right? That's another great example of what we see today. So what's great about this instance and why there's opportunity for UX designers like us is because there's market opportunity, right? VR is used right now in dealerships, like especially during COVID. For folks who have VR, dealerships are sending them this virtual reality headgear. Usually it's maybe a plastic kind of cardboard where they can be able to test drive. It's not like the real thing, but it does kind of give a handout to the user and say, hey, we want to create engagement with our audience. Second one is Verizon, right? They are using becking as a way to be able to acknowledge some of the things, being able to interact with your football player. I think this is really cool because for folks who aren't able to interact with football players, specifically during COVID, you're able to have this kind of one-to-one dimension. IKEA, right? This is another example where IKEA is using augmented reality to be able to use furniture as a way to augment within your home. For folks who, instead of having to purchase furniture and put it around your home, you could use AR in a way to signify how this experience looks within a specific space. So you notice that these things like this app actually requires someone in UX or product designer to learn how to do, or an engineer. That's what this class teaches you. Is like, if you want to design an app like this, you're going to learn the tools, the mental models, and the frameworks to do so. So VR is old, right? It's used actually to train astronauts. I'm not sure if you knew this, but like in the early 90s. So it's something that's been around for a while, but now it's becoming really mainstream. VR has unicorns, like there's total $4 billion invested since 2010, from Oculus Rift to Magic Leap to Hawant VR by Disney. So the opportunity is right for folks like us to be able to help companies design for these specific things. Marketing and activation and trade shows, you see this a lot when you're thinking about how does VR branch out. VR is mainstream. Like as things in press start to get more, there's a need for designers and product designers, engineers, or data science to learn how to design for these and understand how these things look and feel. We see this in the Navy, right? It's really interesting. Like for folks who, let's say, would go on a battleship, they would give them a VR display so they can be able to virtually navigate the ship. And then when they actually come on board, they're able to know where everything is. So there is kind of a precedence of how VR looks and feels. These are just some examples in the wild where Coca-Cola is really getting to VR, Infinity, Audi, IKEA, Six Flags, like the list just goes on and on. Now you're getting folks who are using kind of these environments where you're using these virtual guns and like battles where you can be able to fight. And now businesses like, you have Facebook now using this as a utility tool in order to connect with your loved ones. And so it's very prominent industry, right? And so how do you design for VR, right? Like it's really at the end about an awesome experience, right? You really need to create happiness, which at the end of the day, you need to generate revenue, right? These are things which come for fruition. And so when we think around VR, we're really thinking around these human interface guidelines, right? These are things like the controls that are being used. What are the buttons that you use to interact with the gameplay? What is the UE? What is like the VUI? Like, what are the interaction patterns, right? What's the display looks like? Like, these are design standards which you will learn in this class, from like using your toggle to picking up stuff to understanding how do you go through a list of items, right? Um, from actually scrolling through a list of items as well through this orbital menu. These are different patterns that you're going to learn how to do. I think this is really funny, from like a sword to like an axe. Just some of these things just bring a smile to my face in some of these instances. So we quickly covered VR and AR. Now let's jump into smartwatches. So smartwatches is a really interesting space because it's going full speed, right? Smartwatches are things like Fitbit, Apple, Android Wear. Now you have a lot of startups getting this place. Medical and information is really key. And as you can see here, we really think around how do you design for these specific things. These are some early conceptions around like hardware, but I think it's interesting as you learn in this class how to design for Apple Watch, we educate ourselves around specific patterns, right? From like a watch app, to scrolling, and these are like early days of Apple design concepts. From like taking a phone call, right? It'd be pretty cool to get a phone call from John Ivey, who is the creative VP of Apple, right? But it gives you a sense of like what this experience looks and feels. And so we really do a lot of exploratory design thinking and thinking around how does this interact with the tool sets you learn. We're very hands-on, so we actually design these type of things using Figma, whether you're comfortable with Figma or a different type of software. So I'm just going to browse through some of these items. We also look at like the delta between like designing for Android Wear versus Apple, right? There's a huge difference when you're designing for these different things, from using a music app on the left to actually using a music app on the right, right? Android Wear involves using 3 swipes, right? To be able to move forward or back in a song. Well, Apple Watch has everything front and center, right? These are things that you're going to learn in terms of density, as well as how do you convey these types of experiences. I thought this is really interesting here. Is like Android Wear is really focused around illustration, typography, while Apple on the left really focused around like getting everything in and really just speaking to what the screen showcases. Apple on the left shows a lot of information, while the one on the right gives you this like more feature on the bottom, which gives you a sense of like what app this is being used. So it's good to understand how do these different platforms look and feel, so that when we're designing for these things or when you have a conversation with someone, it could be a really educational conversation, right? What this class teaches you is actually how to become leaders, being able to really have a point of view, so that when you are asked about these specific things, whether you are a UX designer, engineer, marketing, data science, product manager, you're able to thoroughly provide your own point of view. So you can see how these things look and feel. So class starts on October 7th. And it works really well because it's actually on Saturdays. And the reason why is since people are fairly busy during their day-to-day job, this gives you a chance to like get to connect with students like yourself. We meet from 9 till 3. So it's a 6-hour course, but the way it's actually designed is really fun. I keep it engaging. It's really fun because we're actually able to work collaboratively in a sense where the rhythm is very fluid. And at the end of the 5 weeks, you actually are going to be really proud of what you accomplished. You're going to have a beautiful portfolio, which signifies the whole design process. It's going to show you examples of stickies, wireframes, sketches, like the whole product development. And some might say 5 weeks is pretty short, but it's actually enough time for you to really convey something really compelling at the end of the day that you can be really proud of to showcase in your portfolio. I've been teaching at UC Santa Cruz for about 8 to 9 years now. And it's really enlightening when I hear from my students where they're able to get work or really get a new job that they've always been passionate about because of the work that they've done in this class, right? It's the friendships that they've created, it's the relationships that they gain, and it's the knowledge that it's really unique, which you can't really take away from a student. So these are just some examples of some real life student examples that have been done in this class. Keep in mind the level of difficulty varies between student to student, but I do provide you these specific patterns. I do provide you design templates. I do provide you a lot of things so that anyone as a beginner could hit their ground running, right? So these are just some examples of some a virtual reality app for an educational space where a student learns around a volcano, they learn around a chimpanzee. It's really engaging, it's really interactive. This is an example which I thought was really unique. This is a wearable watch called Ping Pong. And imagine you are in an office and you notify your coworkers through this Apple Watch, like who wants to play ping pong like in 45 minutes. So it's like it kind of tracks like who's playing at a specific time, how many games that they have remaining. So it's a really fun and different way of actually engaging with people within your workforce. This is another app from a student which designed a mood tracker app to track the mood. As you know, like mental health is becoming really big today. And so this gives us a chance to really be real with ourselves and like how we're feeling, what do our emotions look like, and be able to track them, but through like a really novel visual way. This is an app for AR. This is a student had built an app. He's really passionate about the medical space. So he wanted to design an augmented reality app where you can like literally be able to learn about the human body augmentedly by tapping on a specific piece of the muscle, learning about it, or even putting a juxtaposed skeleton on your own body, right? But these are things which we're doing in this class where we're thinking outside the box. We're not trying to just sell sugared water. Like we want to try something different. This is another virtual reality app that a student had created for like biking, right? Imagine you are competing with your friends and being able to see like how you are in this competition. And the last one here is an app for augmented reality app for like large distributors or places like Costco or when you're in a supermarket where imagine you have a list of items that you want to order like Fuji apples or bananas. You take an AR mode and it actually helps you to get to the specific place. I know for myself, as a user, I've always had a hard time navigating and finding where things are specifically in Costco. So I actually definitely see a need for something like this. Imagine this is Costco branded, where people can be able to engage and really upsell a really fun experience. So that's about it. 35 minutes, went pretty quick, but I wanted to set up some time for questions, for Q&A. My email address is edorf@ucsc.edu. This class is going to be offered in about a month timeframe. I also offer a second course called Mobile Interface Design, which is around like how to design experiences specifically on mobile. So what's great about these two courses is that they actually play hand in hand. A lot of my students take this course just to kind of get a feel for like the hardware experience and like wearables and AR and VR. And then we jump into the other course, which is more around like the micro interactions and like more of those details. And so if you have any questions, feel free to ping me at edorf@ucs.edu and I'll leave the floor to you guys. Thank you. Bye.
Good night, everyone.